And Laura,
Okay,
I believe
are we
we
good?
have all of the attendees who have pre-registered.
Wonderful. All right. Can you see the presentation okay there, Susan, on my
Yes.
screen? Okay. So today's webinar is about small farm business marketing, and we're specifically going to be going into detail about measuring your return on investment. Susan had mentioned this is a part of a series of webinars that we have hosted through the Capital Region program, and this was a follow-up from our previous one that we did on small business marketing and branding. So we talked a little bit about measuring the return on investment in that presentation, and this is an in-depth look at how to do that. So we're going to go over a little bit of background first about general marketing and what we talked about in the first presentation and how we kind of get to this point of measuring the return on investment before we delve into that. So just a quick note on my background. So I run a marketing consulting firm called the Laramie Group, and I do marketing consulting for the Small Business Development Center that's based out of Shippensburg University. Our center is one of 18 centers throughout the state that is part of an educational and resource partnership to help small businesses in the state kind of grow and develop and thrive. We offer different support programs and consulting to all small businesses in the state, which is less than 100 employees. So it's actually a pretty big business, but that's considered a small business from the government standpoint, and they are for-profit businesses throughout the state. All of our programs are free to businesses for planning, marketing, accounting, legal services, patent development, and so much more. Each of the centers kind of has a specific thing that we all offer general business consulting, but each one kind of has a specific focus for different patent developments or environmental concerns, that kind of stuff. So if you want to learn more about what our program is and what services we offer to small businesses, there is a link on the presentation there. It's ship.edu/SBDC. That will also give you some information about the other centers throughout the state if you are located in a county that's outside of our service area. So each center services a couple counties throughout the state just from a location standpoint, but we certainly can offer help to anybody throughout the state. The next slide talks about the capital RC&D, and I'm going to hand this back to Susan for just a minute to kind of go over what you guys do.
Great. Thanks, Laura. Capital RC&D is a nonprofit organization that works to conserve our natural resources and promote economic development. We primarily work in a 7-county region in south central Pennsylvania, but often collaborate with other organizations, including other RC&D councils in the state. This marketing series is a component of Capital RC&D's local food initiative and is funded through a partnership with the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service in Pennsylvania, and in collaboration also with professionals like Laura, who have been very generous with their time and talent in agreeing to present through this series. You'll find more information about our programs, including high tunnel support, conservation marketing materials, and a link to the recordings of Laura's previous webinar, Branding and Marketing for Small Farm Businesses, under the Projects tab within the Capital RC&D website. And after this presentation, please visit the Local Food Initiative project page on the Capital RC&D website to access Laura's previous webinar, which was Branding and Marketing for Small Farm Businesses. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So the first 2 slides of this presentation, I'm going to go over just in general about kind of an overview of what we talked about in the first presentation about marketing and branding for your business and why it's important. So marketing, just the general definition, is a process that is needed to discern consumers' wants and desires for your product or service. And marketing is really fundamental to the growth of any business. So taking those efforts and following up on them to craft a plan for your business is really important for an ongoing success. So marketing is really meant to anticipate consumers' future needs and wants, not necessarily, it's not reactive, it's meant to be proactive. And it's the process of creating or reorganizing your business to be successful in selling your product or service to people so that they not only desire it, but are willing to purchase it. When we talked about creating that plan and an effective marketing plan, the plan should always include goals for the plan period. We typically do about a year, a budget for that plan period, the different channels you're going to utilize for your marketing efforts, the message or the call to action within those channels, and then a plan for follow-up and evaluation. Our presentation today is really going to focus on that follow-up and evaluation piece of it. So it's meant to be proactive in taking information for marketing that you've done in the current year, say 2016, evaluating your efforts, and utilizing that information to create a plan for 2017. So what we're hoping is that in the farm and the ag business, in the downtime after your busy season, you can utilize this slower time to really plan and schedule out your efforts for 2017. So when the busy season rolls around, your marketing is set up, things are rolling, you have a plan, you have a schedule, and it's something that's not going to take up a lot of your time and effort when you are busy doing your the meat of your business. Within that marketing plan, I talked about the goals. A marketing plan must outline measurable goals that the business would like to achieve over the period of time that you outline in your plan. For sake of example, we're using an annual plan. These goals can be very traditional goals, such as sales, revenue, profits, that kind of stuff that it's very easily measured. They can also be a little bit more non-traditional, such as, there's so much going on in marketing nowadays that's virtual and social that a lot of people try to measure things in there, such as website visits, shares on the social media types, or partnerships, events. It can really be any measurable goal that is valuable to you and your business. So these goals will help to evaluate your return on investment in our follow-up piece of it. So your plan should outline at least 3 goals that hit on different aspects of your business. I have an example here at the bottom. So this was modified from the original presentation. We talked about a prospective new urban farm and some different goals that they would like to reach throughout the year through their marketing and business development efforts. I put in a sales goal in there just because that is the most concrete thing that people can look at and evaluate. So achieving gross sales of $220,000. One of the things we really went into was kind of the ways to alternatively market without some traditional things, and we talked a lot about partnering with local restaurants to be their produce suppliers. So for sake of example, we wanted to partner with at least 3 local restaurants to be their produce suppliers, and we wanted to build an audience on social media of at least 500 followers. And those platforms can vary from business to business, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. It really depends on what your business is. So we're going to use those goals to do our evaluation in this example. Throughout the presentation and through our worksheet that we're going to work on, we're going to talk a lot about these different terms. I did outline these terms on the worksheet that I provided prior to the presentation, so you probably have already seen these. If you have not, I'm going to go through them quickly and just kind of give you an overview of each of them, because we're going to use them a lot throughout the rest of the webinar here. Return on investment, you'll see that shortened to ROI here and throughout business materials, the return on investment. And it's a performance measure used to evaluate the efficiency of your investments. So the ROI is going to measure the amount of return relative to the investment cost, and it's often calculated in a money or profit manner, but it can also be calculated for intangible gains, like I mentioned before, some of the social media and website traffic and email clicks and that kind of stuff. So return on investment can mean a lot of things, especially in a marketing standpoint. A channel is going to be the medium used by your company to advertise your product or service and inform customers about your different promotions. And these mediums are used to increase the ROI. So we're kind of building on each other here. The channel is probably going to be the advertising like traditional ones are magazine, newspaper, radio, billboard. Non-traditional ones now are like the website hits, the web banners, your Facebook page, your Instagram account, your Pinterest boards, that kind of stuff. So those are going to be the channels that we utilize. The next term is impression, which is going to be building off of your channel. How many impressions does your channel provide? The impression is any interaction with a piece of marketing content by an audience member or a consumer. So depending on the medium, these metrics are going to vary. So if you're talking about your website as a channel, the impressions are going to be how many people visited your website. If you're talking about a traditional radio ad, it's going to be how many people potentially hear that radio spot. If you're talking about a billboard, it's going to be how many people are driving by that billboard on a given 30-day period when it's posted. If we're talking about social media posts, it's going to be how many people were able to view it on their newsfeed, how many people clicked on it, liked it, anything like that. And it can also be referred to as consumption. So people consume media, how they see it, and they hopefully absorb it, but we see so many messages in a day. We usually say impression because it's how many times it can be seen. Impressions are often the first level of interaction by a consumer with your message or call to action. The second level is going to be the engagement piece of it. And this is when those impressions or the consumption is further absorbed by that consumer, and it's actually the consumer engages in it in some manner. So not only do they see the content, but they take action on it. So maybe if it's, I use social media because that's really concrete in social media. If somebody sees it and they actually comment on the post or the information that you provided, or they share it, or they forward it to somebody, or you have an email that somebody subscribes to, it's them taking an actual action on that impression, not just seeing it, but doing something with it. When we go to the worksheet in a couple of minutes, you'll see these engagements are measured. I use the term response rate because that's them responding to those impressions. And CPI is the term cost per impression. And the CPI is the cost or expense incurred for each potential customer who views your content provided. And the CPI can assess the effectiveness and profitability and create a comparable measurement across mediums. So we're going to, a lot of times, media that you pay for, traditional media that you pay for, is going to be priced out based on the number of impressions. And it will calculate the cost per impression by taking the amount of people that are going to see your content versus the cost of that content and what you're paying, quote unquote, paying for each impression. And it's going to give us an opportunity to assess our marketing channels and the cost and how many people saw it, and it'll give us a good evaluation of those channels utilized. We're going to further develop that out into the response rate and compare the response rate numbers to the cost per impression numbers, and those two are going to be the two pieces of the puzzle that we use to evaluate our marketing for the previous year. Prior to this presentation, we provided an input worksheet for your return on investment. This asked you to gather some information from your previous efforts in order to create your own return on investment worksheet. It asked you to gather information about the channels or mediums you used over the past 12 months, how much those channels cost, the potential impressions for each of those channels, and the response rates that you could measure from each of those channels. That's not always an easy thing to gather if it wasn't something you were tracking throughout the year. It might be something you have to take your best guess on. If it wasn't well tracked throughout the year, it might be something you can gather over time. The best way to do it is to do it as you go. So moving forward, it'll be something that you can easily track so that you can evaluate at the end of the plan year. But for the first time you're doing it, it might be something that you'll have to, take a concerted effort to gather, or we're going to utilize some sample numbers to give you an idea of how it's done and what information you need, and it can be something that you gather moving forward for your 2017 plan. So we asked you to compile a list of all your advertising channels or mediums that you utilized over the course of the last 12 months. So that's going to be things like your website, your Facebook page, if you attended farmers markets, if you went to any other events, if you did blogs, if you were doing wholesale efforts, if you were in different stores and customer service, anything like that, the little touch points graphic that you see on the right-hand side with the circles is something that we developed in the first presentation for marketing and branding. And we created a touch points for your brand that helped develop those channels. So if that's not something that you have a good grasp on or have a good outline of currently, you can certainly refer back to that presentation to create touch points and help develop the list of the channels you're going to use for the upcoming year if you need to. This was a sample one we did for a brand, a generic farm brand. Once you have your channels listed, I then asked you to gather information on the estimated impressions for each of the mediums you used. I think I had mentioned for the purchased media, the outlet's going to be able to provide that information. So if you paid for a print ad in a newspaper or in a magazine or in a community outlet of some sort, they'll be able to give you information on the impressions for that media, such as how many subscriptions to the magazine that go out per month that your ad appears in, how many people subscribe to a specific newspaper, and if it gets passed around, they can kind of give you the impressions for that medium. There's no typical number, but a local newspaper may have a circulation of about 1,400, and say 2 people see that per subscription. So maybe our possible impressions for your print ad were 2,800. It's going to be things like that. For the social media, for the more virtual channels that you utilize, you can usually see exactly how many people saw your Facebook post, especially for business pages now. You can see if 330 people viewed this, it showed up on their news feeds. Or if you're on Instagram and you have 250 followers, obviously that's going to show up on 250 people's news feed. If you're at an event such as a farmer's market, usually the organizer for that event can give you an estimate on foot traffic per week. If that specific week they had about 300 people come through the farmer's market, that would be your number of impressions for that channel. It's going to be different for each of the channels. It's going to might be different per month. It's just going to be something that you can either track or estimate based on your previous plan. The next piece of information for those channels that we outlined is the response rate for each channel. So when we're talking about the second level of engagement by those consumers, it's when somebody actually takes an action. So if you have a goal that was outlined for those channels, you're going to base it on that action. It's going to be different. It can be something as simple as a sale. It can be a download, a like, a share, a subscription. It's really going to be very customized to what the channel is and what your brand is. But we like to use the farmer's market example because it's something that's very tangible. So if you're at the farmer's market, that's your channel. There were 300 people through per week. So for that week, there was 300 potential, impressions, potential customers, and out of those 300, you had 40 sales. So the response rate is going to be, 40 as opposed to the 300 impressions. Another example is going to be the social media. So if I have a Facebook posting and I posted a recipe or something about a product that we're offering this week, it was seen by 330 people. It showed up on their news feed, and 14 people liked it, and 4 people then shared it with other people. Those are going to be my actual response rates. So they took that second level of action to not only see it, but engage in it somehow. So in that input worksheet, if you had a chance to complete all of that information, or as much of that information as you could for the channels you've utilized over the past year, the potential impressions, the response rate from that, you're going to have all of that information kind of gathered, and that's what we're going to utilize to do input on the Excel worksheet that we provided, which will do some calculations for you. I know this is a lot of terms and a lot of information that we kind of threw out right at the beginning. It's meant so that when we do the worksheet, you have a better understanding of what we're inputting and why we're inputting it, and the evaluation numbers that are going to come out of it. So we're going to open it up real quick here. If there's any questions that have been brought up to this point, I can answer them. If you want to bring up anything, you're welcome to throw them into the questions thing, or we'll unmute it for a second and we'll open it up for discussion for a minute before we take the information and input it into our worksheets.
So all participants have been unmuted in case there's any questions.
We're good?
Yeah.
Okay. If questions come up as we are moving forward and doing some of the input, please feel free to throw them into the control panel. Susan will see them, and if it's something that needs to be answered and would be helpful to be answered immediately, she will let me know. Otherwise, we will answer questions and provide other information after we do the input. We'll open it back up for everybody. So this first slide is going to show some sample data that I put into. So taking all of the information that we gathered, we're going to input it into our worksheet, which was provided. It's an Excel worksheet. When we input this information, calculations for the CPI are going to automatically come up in the 7th column. And then when we put in our response rate to the 8th column, a cost per engagement or response rate is going to come up at the end. And we're going to utilize those two columns to really evaluate the effectiveness of our channels, evaluate it against each other, which one was most effective one, which was least effective, which one is really cost efficient, which one is worthwhile, that kind of stuff. So it'll give us a good way to measure it against each other. This one just has sample data in to show the numbers. We're going to go through and actually input information. I'm going to visually input it for you so you guys know how to input it and what it means when it does some of the calculations. The response rates will have to be put in manually simply because they may not be the same goals for each of them, and we'll explain that. But this gives you a sample of what it would look like once it's input. So I'm going to pull out of this and actually show you a sample of doing some input here. So this is what the worksheet looks like when it's blank. It has, a bunch of zeros. You'll see some of these triangles, which is where it'll do the calculations, and this is kind of a breakdown of how our media spend. So this first column is the medium that we're talking about. I kept the first column very vague so that the second column is specific to the specific channel within that medium. So if we're talking about print and you utilized a magazine ad this year, that's kind of where that comes in. Direct is kind of the direct sales, like if you do phone calls, if you do door-to-door marketing, if you direct mail, it's things that are very specifically sent out to a targeted audience. For our example today, we're talking about direct phone calls. If we got a list of phone numbers from an event we went to, or following up with previous customers, or we're kind of canvassing a specific neighborhood or area, that's kind of where that comes in with the direct marketing. Website, we're talking about our specific business website, our emails, our e-newsletter that we send out to all current and previous customers. Online marketing, for this example, I have web ads or banners, which are the little banner ads that can show up on different websites. You could also do Google ads. You can do anything that's considered an online ad as opposed to a print ad or traditional ad. Networking and partnerships can be, networking is obviously always very important. For our example here, I use the Chamber of Commerce membership as our networking piece. Our events is a local farmers market. Social media is, I'm going to social here, our Facebook and Instagram accounts, and then I have an other tab if just for other efforts. So I'm going to go through this worksheet and put in some sample numbers and explain how it calculates out so that when you're inputting your own information, you can understand why it's doing what it's doing and where to put certain numbers. So we're going to start just at the top at the print and our magazine ad. We're going to say we did a couple print ads throughout the year, and there were 250 per ad, and we ran 4, one for each season, and this will automatically calculate if we ran 4 ads at $250, our total cost for that medium was $1,000. For the number of impressions, if you're doing a traditional print piece like that, the publication will be able to give you stats for the number of impressions. So if this specific magazine had a circulation of 1,200 per time we ran per month. So if we ran for 4 times throughout the year, we're going to do that 1,200 times 4, 2,400, 4,800, and this will give us a cost per impression. So if we ran 4 ads throughout the year and potentially 4,800 people saw those ads throughout the year, the cost for each of those impressions is going to be 21 cents. So that's where the CPI comes in. It's going to be the number of impressions divided by the cost for the campaign, and it'll tell you how much it, quote unquote, cost you for each person to see your message or your call to action. We're going to do that same thing for each of the mediums going down and look at the cost per impression first before we talk about the response rate. For the direct phone calls, for this example, we're going to say we had 1 or 2 people actually making these phone calls and leads, and we paid them per hour. So we're going to say we paid them, we did 25 hours over those 2 people and paid them $10 an hour. So we also spent $250 doing the direct phone calls. We did that 1 time throughout the year, so the cost of that direct campaign was $250. And the number of impressions, the number of people that they directly did outreach to over the course of that campaign was 100 people. They called 100 people over the course of those 25 hours, talked to them directly, and got the message out that way. And that's going to give you the cost per impression for that campaign. So the cost per impression for that campaign is $2.50. So this already gives you a good idea of comparing the two. The cost per impression for each of these is very different, and you'll see it kind of come through all these mediums that way, and we'll talk about it at the end. For our website, we're going to say we built a new website this year. It cost us $1,500. You know, we did it 1 time for the year. So the total cost for the year was $1,500. And over the course of the year, we had 900 visitors to that website. So when we say 900 people came to the website, for each person that viewed the website, the cost per impression was $1.67. So you'll start to see how we can compare each of these down the board. So I'll go through the rest of these quickly just to get some numbers in here for you guys. We do an e-newsletter. The subscription to that is $10 a month. We do it 12 months out of the year, so the cost for the year is $120. The email list goes out to, let's say, 200 people every time we send it out, and we send it out, obviously, 12 times a year. So it goes out to 2,000 to 2,400. So 2,400 people see that, even though there's some repeat people, over the course of the year for $120. So the cost per impression is only 5 cents for that medium. Our online web banners are $150. We do those 2 times a year through Google Ads. It's $300 for that campaign. Every time that campaign runs, 3,000 people see it. So for 2 campaigns, 6,000 people see it. And again, that is a 5 cents per every cost per impression. Our Chamber of Commerce membership is $349. We pay that once a year, and there are 420 other members in there that we either put our ad into we get listed in, and with other members, we are in their directory, we're on their website, that kind of stuff. Networking can be a little bit different of a beast than the other channels, but we put it in there just for sake of comparison. This is a good one we always like to talk about with these businesses, is the local farmers market. So we're going to say locally it costs about $20 a week to be at your local farmers market. That runs for 20 weeks out of the year. So the cost to attend that specific farmers market is $400 for the year. Each week we get about 200 people walking through that farmers market. So over the course of 20 weeks, we'll see about 4,000 people walk through. Again, there's some repeats, and that's totally fine, because we'll want people to see our message and our brand a couple times before they may actually engage in it. So the cost per impression for each person that walks through that market and sees your table, it's about 10 cents per impression. The social media tends to be a low-cost medium. For Facebook, for the sake of putting some numbers in here, we're going to say we boost some of the posts. Maybe we spend $10 a month, about 10 months out of the year, just to get some boosts in there to share some of our specific events and our specials that are going on. And over the course of those 10 boosted posts, we see about 500 people view those. You can see specifically on your count how many people see that ads. It'll say how many people it got out to. And we're going to say 500 people saw those boosts, and that was 20 cents per impression. Instagram, there are some sponsored options, but for example here, we're not going to use any paid media on Instagram. We're going to say we do 1 post a week, so there's 52 posts throughout the year. We didn't spend any money to sponsor it, but we do have, say, 150 followers over the course of the campaign that see our ad every time it runs. So when we talk about views or impressions for that, we're going to take the 52 weeks a year, and our 150 followers see that every week. So we have 7,800 views. And again, the cost per impression is going to be 0 because we haven't spent any money on it. There's another category here if you have, some other media that's a little bit, it's not quite as traditional, or something else you want to add in here. I like to put it in there just because some people are like, oh, I forgot I do this. So you can throw that into the other category. So what we're going to look at now is the cost per impression. So this column G here that we're looking at, it's going to give us an idea of measuring the different channels against each other. The most expensive cost per impression is this direct media, because it's so focused on specifically who you're trying to reach. You're reaching very targeted customers. The least expensive mediums are going to be obviously some of the social media that you don't spend any money on. We look at these web banners and the email. They're really low as well as the farmers market. So it gives you a good piece of the puzzle here, but it really is only one piece of the puzzle, because for small businesses, it's not always about the cost per impression. I think the small business really needs to, the second piece of the puzzle is this response rate, which becomes extremely important and gives us a much better view of where our money is best spent and most efficient. So coming out of that cost per impression, we're actually going to go to the second level and look at the engagement of the consumers at those different channels, and look at it as the cost per engagement as well as the cost per impression. So while the magazine has a lot of impressions, it also costs a lot of money. The cost per impression was fairly low, but say coming out of that, we only had, say, 10 website visits or 2 actual sales, or however you want to dictate the response rate from that medium. So I'm going to say we had 2 sales for that medium, and that's actually going to calculate out a cost per engagement is at $500. So we spent $1,000 for this magazine ad. We had 2 sales come out of it. They came to the website and actually did a sale. So it costs us, for each of those customers, it costs us $500 through that medium. Whereas if we take a look at this direct campaign where we did the phone calls, we spent $250. The cost per impression was $250, which was the highest. But out of those 100 people that we actually talked to, we had 15 people that actually came through and did a sale or responded, did that engagement. So we can take a look at the cost per engagement for that at $16.67. And that gives you a much better idea of how the 2 of those mediums compare, magazine versus direct phone calls. Even though the cost per impression told a different story, this cost per engagement is going to give you a better idea of where your money is very well spent because it's so targeted. So we're going to do the same thing through this entire worksheet here. That way we can compare the cost per engagement and give us an idea of where we go to evaluate it to move forward with our planning process. So with our website, we had 900 people visit the website, so the cost per impression was $1.67. Of those 900 people that we got to the website, we had 130 sales. Now with the website, some of these other mediums are going to direct people there to do sales. So that in and of itself is something we consider. It doesn't tell the whole story, but we still need the website there if we're doing online sales. If you're not doing online sales, you may direct people to your website to gather information to find out where your products are located, such as a farmer's market or a local supplier, and you can utilize it that way. The e-newsletter went out to 2,400 people over the course of the campaign. And for the email, we're going to, instead of doing sales, we're going to say the people that clicked through to go to the website or to go to a special promotion or whatever that is. So out of 2,400 views, we got 300 people to click through and actually view some content, and that gives you a cost per engagement there. So that's a good example of how not all of these response rates are going to be directly correlated to an end sale, because that can be like a action that is taken after 3 or 4 steps. Somebody hears about your product, somebody sees you somewhere and sees your brand at the market. They see you at the market again next week and they buy something and they subscribe to your email list. And then they see an email come from you and they click through and find out where you're going to be next and visit you there too. So there's a lot of layers to those engagements. For the sake of the response rate here, we're talking specifically about people that get the email and then click through to find the information that you're providing. For our web banners, 6,000 people were able to view them on the website where they appeared, wherever that may be, a Google ad or an industry website, an affiliated organization, whatever you participate in. And of those 6,000 views, we had 23 people actually click on the banner ad and go to your website to get information. For the Chamber of Commerce, there's 420 other members and opportunities for people to see or hear about your brand. For the sake of networking and partnerships, let's say we had 2 of those people actually became suppliers or wholesalers or forwarded you to somebody who became a supplier. So our response rate for that really is those connections and those contacts. So the cost per that engagement calculates out based on that, even though it's a different metric than some of the other ones. Our local farmers market, we had 4,000 people walk through over the course of the 20 weeks that we were there. So for 20 weeks, we had, let's say we had 10 sales per week. So 200 sales over the course of the 20 weeks. And that gives you a cost per engagement. And you can start to see how these really compare across the board and how some of these very targeted channels give you the most bang for your buck. So for Facebook and Instagram, these social ones, we're going to talk a little bit more about the response rate being intangible. It's the people that like it or share it or, pass it on to other like-minded people. So of the 500 people that saw our boosted post, the 10 that we did throughout the year, we're going to say 15 of them shared it with others, because then they took the information, shared it with somebody else that they thought it would be very targeted to. It's very direct, so that gives us a cost per engagement on that. For Instagram, since it doesn't cost anything, we're going to say of the 7,800 people that saw our message, another 200 liked it and really engaged in it, and it's still going to cost us nothing, which is why people really like to do social media, even though sometimes it feels very repetitive. It's because it can be very cost efficient. So taking this last column I, the cost per engagement, we're going to get a much better picture of where our money is well spent. Even though we had a low cost per impression in magazine, our cost per engagement was extremely high, and it was one of our most expensive mediums at $1,000. So when we go to evaluate this, we might say maybe that's not where we're getting a good, positive, response from our consumers. Our consumers are really coming in well with the direct contacts. Our website, the email is really efficient for a cost per engagement, as is these web banners, which can be very targeted as well with some demographics. The Chamber of Commerce comes in pretty high. However, the response for that we evaluated at new wholesale suppliers, which might be very, very cost effective, even though it's it's one of the higher ones on our evaluation here. That wholesale supplier is going to be a big source of revenue, so that might be taken into consideration there. The local market was a great cost per engagement. Facebook was okay, and then obviously Instagram was 0. So this gives you a good idea of how you're going to take your input information, put it in throughout the worksheet, and then evaluate the cost per impression as well as the cost per engagement across your mediums.
Laura, there was a question that
Sure.
this might be a good time to read it. The question is, this is all money based on the sheet. How do you account for time involved in each of these modes of advertising in the overall real business investment?
Right. Well, as a small business owner, most people know that their time is what's stretched most thinly. I'll talk a little bit about in the next steps how you can really budget your time. As far as in the worksheet, there really isn't a great way to input how much time and effort you put into it. That's going to be how you manage your time. Now, some of these things like the print ad, that might be something that takes an hour of your time to put together with them and it goes out there, and that's not a big deal. Now, when you're talking about putting together a schedule and posts for some of these social things, that's where a lot of people get overwhelmed when they say, I don't have time to do that every week. I don't have the patience to come up with the content and that. And that's when we really get into the pre-planning for that and the 2017 plan that outlines some of that for you. So it's not something you have to spend a lot of time on a day-to-day basis. All of these things like the market, any events that you physically have to be at, if you want to include, say the market's going to be 4 hours of your time on any given week, you can certainly, if you want to give your time a monetary value, you can include that in the cost per week. Say if I'm not doing something else and I'm at this market, it's going to cost X number of dollars. Or if you're paying somebody to be at one of those, absolutely include that in the cost. So if it's $20 to be at that market per week and you're paying somebody $40 a week to physically be there, include that in your cost per ad, which is, that, not an ad, but in that column. There's ways to kind of input it in there, but as far as your time, that's more of a time management thing, and that's going to be, we'll address that in the next steps and how to really feel like to make sure that marketing is well planned in advance, so it's not something you're worrying about and constantly having to spend hours coordinating during your busy season when you're actually doing your business and your work. Does that answer the question? Roundabout way. I'm going to go back to our presentation, if I can find it. Here it is. So we did the input, and I kind of explained the process with that. Once we have all that information input, we're going to really kind of take it and evaluate it. And like I said, you're going to use this chart to compare the mediums side by side and understand where your customers are responding most positively. I mentioned in the website example, keep in mind that some mediums do play off of each other. A print ad may drive traffic to your website and create a sale that way, so things are not going to be very cut and dry and black and white as with anything else in business. It'll play off of each other, but it's meant to provide a better understanding of where you're spending your money and the outcomes of each of them. A good baseline, this is a very general statement, a good baseline for return on investment is 5 to 1. If you're spending $100 on marketing somewhere, you'd like the revenue that comes in to be about $500 because it accounts for not only that being an effective channel, but the associated costs of you doing your business in general. So it's covering the costs, like I said, about if you're talking about the farmer's market costs you $100, you'd like it to bring in $500 because you're paying not to be there. Perhaps you're paying someone to be there. Obviously, the cost of providing the produce or the supplies that are at the market, travel costs, there's a lot of things that go into it. So a good baseline for return on investment is a 5 to 1 ratio. Otherwise, you're not really covering all your costs and creating numbers that are in the black. I did make a note here to open for questions and discussions. If there's any other questions that we want to address now before I get into kind of how to move forward with this evaluation information, if you have questions about the input piece of it, if you have questions about different mediums or how to pull the information, we'll open it up here quickly and address any of those before we hit the last topic.
Let's see, I've taken everyone off of mute if anyone wants to pose a question.
All right, I will go to the last topic then. So once we take all of our input information, we take all that information, put it into our worksheet. We calculate our cost per impression. We calculate our response rate. We do some evaluation. We look at those things. We understand where we spent our money, where we spent our money well, or where we didn't spend it so well. We're going to take all of that information and use that to develop a marketing plan for the upcoming season or year. The advantage of creating this plan for the upcoming year is that it is something that you will execute throughout the year as opposed to kind of flying by the seat of your pants. A lot of small businesses have ideas about what they want to do for marketing. They start doing things and then somebody gives them an idea or somebody gives them a suggestion and then they kind of shift gears and they don't follow through with all of the efforts that they had originally started, and then it gets hard to manage because they're trying to start something new and they're not really sure which direction to go, and then they don't know if what they were doing was working, and that can be really overwhelming for somebody that is not focused on marketing. They're focused on their business. So the best piece of advice I can give to small business owners is create a plan for the year, execute it throughout the year, and at the end of the year, when you do your evaluation and follow-up, that's the point in time where you can say, we're going to try something different next year. The magazine, while it was nice, it didn't create a great response. We spent a lot of money on it, so we're going to take that budget from 2016 and reallocate it to maybe some of these other mediums that were working really well. Or we're going to try maybe a second market because that seemed to do really, was an effective place for us to be. So the worksheet is going to give you those tools to move forward. The other way that the plan helps on a day-to-day basis for a small business owner is it gives you something to use as an excuse. I always say you plan out your marketing channels for the year, you plan out your budget and your goals, and when people constantly approach you about all these different opportunities, we really want you to be here, we really want you to be in this publication, we really want you to participate in this. It's a great way for you to say, we've come up with our marketing plan for the year, we have our budget set, we're going to stick with that. However, we'd like to collect the information from you, and if it's something we can consider to participate in next year, we would like to do that. And that gives you a little bank of information, a little other options for touch points that when you go back to the table the following year, you do your return on investment evaluation, maybe you're pooling one of your mediums for the next year, you can say, we're going to pool our magazine and our budget from that year, and here's a stack of opportunities that were provided to us throughout the year from different customers, friends, associates, whoever it may be. We really were interested in these two events. We didn't participate in them because it wasn't part of our budget for this year, but we'd like to consider them for the coming year. So here's the information, here's the cost, here's the contact information. We're going to put this in our plan for 2018, whatever that is. So really being able to utilize your plan to work off of and stick to gives you the focus and the opportunity to not get distracted by other options. The other thing to do throughout the year is to constantly collect feedback and input from consumers during your interactions. If you're physically somewhere and you have customers there and they're giving you feedback, take that feedback, write it down, include it in that pile of marketing opportunities, something to consider for the next year. That'll give you a good way to say, people really wanted us to be at this event and these people approached us about this event, so let's put this in the plan for next year and take our budget from the magazine and do so. And that's kind of a way to take that feedback and that input and not have to think about what to do with it right now, but utilize that for further planning. So setting a plan for your marketing budget and channels and really stick to it throughout the year. Don't give yourself an opportunity to get unfocused and take the focus away from your business, your product, your service, to constantly be redoing your marketing process. The other biggest piece of advice I can give to small business owners is to really set a day and time each week to do these marketing tasks in a manageable way. It's not something you want to deal with on a daily basis. It's not something I would ever ask somebody to do on a daily basis or even attempt to do posts or social media stuff every single day. Set a day and time each week, whatever works best for you. If it's Monday night at 8 o'clock and you do a half-hour work every Monday at 8 p.m. from 8 to 8:30, put it as a meeting on your calendar. You sit down, you follow up on emails, you follow up, you do your social media posts for the week, you reply to comments or questions that were on social media. Maybe you follow up and confirm events for the upcoming week. Maybe it's you have to get some information out to suppliers about the next CSA, whatever it is. You do those marketing tasks at that set day and time every single week. Put it on your calendar. You don't plan over it. You plan around it, and then that's when you deal with those things, as opposed to dealing with it on a consistent basis. Or what happens with a lot of small businesses, they don't deal with it at all. They say, when I have time to do this Facebook post, I'll get around to it. And 9 times out of 10, it just doesn't get done because you don't make time. So the best thing to do is really set a marketing meeting each week for yourself to do these tasks. Or if you have somebody that's helping you, or an intern, whatever that is, that's going to be your time to sit down and talk about what you need to do for the week. And if you're doing social media posts, that's when it gets done. You can certainly make a calendar for what those posts are going to be, but when you actually sit down at your day and time each week, that's when you're going to create the post. It doesn't have to be sent out, right? Then it can be scheduled. The email blast can be put together and be scheduled to send out whenever you want to do that throughout the week. And there's some strategies involved with that, but that's the best thing a small business owner can do, is make marketing manageable, and that's by setting a plan for the year and setting a day and time each week to execute your tasks that you outlined. We're going to open it back up again here. We went through a lot of information, a lot of terms, a lot of numbers. Any general questions, any specific questions, we'll open it up here. I also want to encourage people, I have my email at the bottom here. If you want to ask specific questions when you view this, you're more than welcome to email me. If you want to look into the resources of the capital RC&D, please feel free to reach out to them. If you're interested in going through this type of worksheet or this type of exercise and you don't want to do it by yourself, you want to sit down and do it with a consultant, the SBDC would be happy to do that with you. We're happy to do that with you as a client, and it's completely free of charge to you. It's a program that is provided through funds through the state and federal government, and we encourage everybody to utilize them. So we're going to open it up here for anybody that's currently on the webinar to ask questions, but anybody that's not currently on the webinar and views this, please reach out in any of those mediums. We're happy to help. We're happy to answer questions, and if we can't answer them, we will forward you to somebody that can. We're going to open it up here with Susan, and for those of you that don't have questions, thank you for participating. Thank you for listening. Feel free to go back through the presentation and go through anything that doesn't make sense, view it again, ask us questions, and we appreciate your participation.
Very good, and just to remind everyone, there were several handouts involved with this webinar as well, and please check them out. I believe they were linked in the webinar invitation, or that is the confirmation of the webinar.